And I think that this is our 14th or 15th virtual meeting since we pivoted very quickly after the decision was made to postpone our conference and started on April 3rd, offering these opportunities at first to network and just provide some support and opportunity to talk about this crazy time that we're all living in, and then moved along to some topical workshops, which we started again weeks ago now, and making sure that the topics that we've chosen have been responsive to the conversations that came out of those earlier meetings. And very excited about the participation that we've had, and we do feel, I can say personally, that it has been a really nice way to stay connected and be supportive of each other. So with that, we have so much to cover today, so I'm going to move quickly to introduce Rebecca Dahl, who's going to give you the ground rules of our session today, and then we'll turn it back over to me and we'll get going on the substance. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming.
So hi everyone, if we haven't met yet, I'm Rebecca. I'm the face behind all of the emails around these programs. I'm just going to do a quick housekeeping. I know we're all practically Zoom experts at this point, but I do want to direct you to the bottom toolbar. On the left-hand corner, you'll see the little microphone icon, the mute button. So I do want to encourage everyone to be on mute during this call so that we prevent any sort of unnecessary feedback. We are recording. And then the other side, because we are expecting a large number of participants, to the right of that mute button is a camcorder icon for video. So we are going to ask everyone to stop their video, although it's lovely to see you all, just to help with the bandwidth of this presentation. And then following along that toolbar, you'll see a little speech bubble icon that says chat. If you click that, a chat window will come up. We'll all be able to see that. So I encourage you to submit any questions you have throughout the presentation into that chat. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to put them there as well. And I'll be monitoring my email in case you need to get back in or having difficulties as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to Amy.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca. And I just want to give Rebecca, as I always do, a huge shout out for all the work that she has put into making these series of workshops happen for us. So today we are covering merger, and I'm going to, again, very quickly run through some preliminaries, and then we'll dive into a presentation by Catherine Rawson, who is the Executive Director of the Weantioge Heritage Land Trust, and also serves as the board chair for the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. So let's see, Amy, what are you doing? There you go. All right. So again, I scanned our attendance list here, and I know all of you. Not only do I know you, but I feel like I know all of you quite well. And I like to think that you know CLCC quite well too. And we don't need to go through our mission, but just know that we are there for you. And one of our greatest roles, probably in the state, is to serve as a convener, bringing groups together and making sure that, there we go, that you have an opportunity to network and build stronger networks through collaboration. Back in 2012, we started a regional land trust series, which really were very informal opportunities for all of you to get together in your region and get to know each other. And as we've moved along, we've added to that initial program on the spectrum of providing collaborative opportunities or opportunities to talk about collaboration. We have created focus groups, which allow individuals who serve in the same role across the state for their land trust. So whether it be executive staff or stewardship chairs or communications coordinators, whatever that might be, is to bring you all together to talk and learn and share. And that moved us along to our regional advancement initiatives, which many of you on this call have participated in. In those cases, that's a deeper dive where we get groups together in the same region with funding through, mostly through our community foundations and general operating support from organizations like the Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation, to give land trusts an opportunity to focus on a certain area like communications or stewardship, and individually get some coaching while also making sure that there are regional opportunities to dive deeper together into that subject area. And then finally, in 2018, we began an advanced collaboration and merger assistance program, which has given us an opportunity to go around the state and work with groups that are interested in merger and want to learn more about it. And we've had some nice discussions which have led us to this point. The Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation, as I had said, they are have been a supporter of CLCC, giving us an opportunity through general operating support to undertake the programs that I just enumerated. And we are very fortunate that they have offered the state of Connecticut a merger assistant grant program under Building Enduring Land Trusts. And we have that information on our website. And of course, you can contact me. But basically, this would be a program to encourage and support the merger of land trusts in our state. The awards that would be provided could be used to cover the costs of, or would be used to cover the costs associated with completing a merger. So they're offering full support for merger implementation. It then, for those groups that successfully merge, it would also include a multi-year general operating support component to it. Letters of inquiry are due on May 27th. And again, you can ask some questions about that, not only on this call, but also looking at our website and then communicating with the foundation directly as well. And I will tell you that Bob Kinase of the Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation is here with us today and will be listening in and sharing as needed. But again, I want to thank the foundation for offering Connecticut this tremendous opportunity. And then the next phase would be for those that are not ready to put in a letter of interest around merger, would be for groups that are interested in merger, but you're at the very beginning of the process. And this would be an opportunity to work directly with CLCC and a consultant to help your organization and a partner, one or more partner, to assess whether merger is right for you. And we can talk a little bit more about the details of that during the Q&A, but I don't want to delay too much. And let's get into Catherine's presentation. So to cover, there we go. Today's goals, again, through Catherine's presentation and her experience with merger, we're going to look at some of the key indicators in the decision to merge, the process, factors contributing to the success, some of the obstacles, and then we'll end it with some Q&A. I'll tell you that in light of the volume of questions that have come up, we have decided to extend this for 15 minutes. Certainly don't feel any obligation to stay with us for 15 minutes longer, you know, to 1:45, but you are welcome to, because we do anticipate having a robust Q&A session, which we're excited about. So with that, before we get started, we have a quick survey, and we're wondering if you can just, hopefully you're all seeing that. It's just a quick poll, if you can go through that and answer some of these questions. So nobody has voted yet, either that or it's not working. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I'll give you another couple of seconds and we'll get to a minute and then we'll move on. This looks like we've got a variety here. With a lot of folks on here not in the process of merger. Okay, great. Thank you all. Okay, Rebecca, I'm going to leave it to you to go ahead and take that down. For question 2, just about all of, oh, good, got it. Okay, Joe from Shelton Land Trust said for question 2, just about all of the above. Great, thanks, Joe.
We should be all set there, Amy.
Great, okay, terrific. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Catherine Rawson, who again is the Executive Director of Weantioge Heritage Land Trust and I'm proud to say our board chair for the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. So take it away, Catherine, and thanks again. I'm going to mute myself now and turn off my screen.
Okay, great. So I hope everybody can see, I've shared my screen, so what you should be looking at is a slide of an American kestrel. And I'm the Executive Director of Weantioge. I've been with Weantioge now about 10 years. And we're a regional land trust in Northwest Connecticut, and we have been since the start of our organization in 1965. And we completed our first merger in 2019, and we're looking at another one for 2020. And as I've been with land trusts and working in this community over the course of the past 10 years, I think I, as well as probably most people on this call, have really seen an uptick in the interest in merger, really stemming, I think, in large part from the work that CLCC has done to bring us all together as a land trust community. And the education and the bonds that we now have through partnership have really, I think, made the comfort level about talking about merger pretty good. So for today's workshop, it's really hard to get in everything you might want to know about a merger in one 30, 45-minute session. But we're going to increase your awareness about the awareness and understanding of the merger process and answer some of the questions that you have about that. The questions we received in advance were terrific. And I have built some of your questions already into the presentation. And then, as Rebecca said, you can use the chat box to ask more questions as we go along. And when we get towards the end of the presentation, there'll be another opportunity for Q&A. I broke up the topics for this presentation along the natural sort of merger workflow process. So we're going to begin by talking a little bit about pre-merger, where we'll talk about assessing the needs and the potential for merger, and also building trust and collaboration prior to even thinking about merger. Then we'll go into the merger deliberation process. So what you do once you have begun your due diligence period and how that works. And I think in today's presentation, we'll spend the most time on 1 and 2. 3, the actual merger, I'm going to show you the very simple legal steps that occur in order for a merger to take effect. And I hope to just demystify that process a little bit. And then post-merger, I'm going to touch on integration and show you a little bit about what happens in integration, but also the message I have about integration is, for the time that you spend on merger, plan an equal amount of time thinking about the integration. So we're not going to focus heavily on the work that you do through integration, but I'm going to show you a sketch of what occurs and show you that merger is just the beginning. Okay, so a number of groups were asking questions about, well, what are the benefits of merger? And I think generally speaking, in my experience, groups come together to think about merger either to solve a problem or to seek some kind of opportunity. And often those are two sides of the same coin. So for example, a group might have concerns about sustainability. That might be whether they are able to replenish their board of directors sufficiently to keep the organization going. The opportunity side of that would be helping to ensure perpetuity. So helping you construct a path forward that ensures your organization is satisfying what is one of the most challenging business plans for any nonprofit, which is to be sustainable and to exist in perpetuity. The other common concerns that I've seen from groups as they're thinking about merger are capacity to satisfy their current mission. That could be inspecting their properties or handling stewardship on their preserves. And there might be an interest in reducing competition for limited resources. And that's not just dollars, that's people and volunteers and board members. In a state like Connecticut, where we have 136 land trusts, there are lots of different ways that we might feel like we don't have sufficient resources to continue our work in perpetuity. So on the opportunity side, again, you might be working to seize that opportunity to help strengthen your organization in perpetuity, broaden your base of support, which might be possible if you're looking at expanding your territory outside of a single town. You might see opportunities to enhance efficiency. So, for example, there is a lot of duplication in the work that land trusts do independently, from bookkeeping to financial statements. And then you might also find opportunities to enhance your mission through growth. So increasing your capacity to take on new acquisitions, to steward the land that is in your care. Those are all opportunities that merger may make possible. One of the questions we received was, how do we self-assess our readiness as an organization for merger? And there is no one way to do this. But as I was thinking through this question, there were a couple of things that came to my mind. And it does not have to be either a heavy lift. First, you need a consensus to begin the due diligence phase. When you start this process as an organization, either on your own, thinking about trying to find a partner to merge with, or if you've already identified that partner, the first question that you have to build consensus around is not whether to merge, but it's just whether to enter into a conversation to assess the feasibility of merger. That's a much simpler and easier question to build consensus around. I also thought it was important to have an upfront commitment of volunteer staff time or resources for a period of time. In my experience, a merger from start to finish, once you begin due diligence, it's difficult to complete it within 12 months. It's more likely you'd be looking at an 18-month period to do that. And then I put these plus signs there just to, again, remind you, merger is just the first part. Because once you've merged and you hopefully have this new organization that you're excited about, you have all of the work of integration and all of the work of continuing to build the culture of what is a new and very special organization. It's helpful if you have a proven ability to partner and collaborate. It's most helpful if you've shown that ability already with the group you're thinking about merging with. Standards and practices and accreditation just in general, I have found incentivize and actually make the merger process easier. So in my experience, accreditation has led to groups, on the one hand, needing to professionalize, which often then results in the desire to merge in order to be able to fund and support the staff that are needed for an accredited organization, if that's the direction you're going in. But also, and perhaps more importantly, standards and practices make routine the operations that we are all doing as land trusts. So even if you're not accredited, but you are following standards and practices, that makes the merger process and the due diligence that you need to do much more simple. You're all sharing, you're all adhering to the same practices, you're managing risk in a similar way, and it makes the due diligence process more streamlined. Clear, objective understandings of your own strengths and weaknesses, and if you think there are aspects of your organization that might reflect peril. So let's say, for example, you had operating deficits. Being able to identify what your strengths are, what you're bringing to the table, and also what your weaknesses are, help you be a better partner in the merger process, because you want to be really self-disclosing those things, but also you want to find a partner that is going to bring some strengths to complement your weaknesses and vice versa. It's a given with any type of governance, but patient leadership and good communication, it's a long process. There are always ups and downs, and having patient leaders who can bring everybody along in the process is just invaluable. And upfront, a commitment to maintaining the partnership that you have even if the merger fails. As you start this process, there's no guarantee of success, but you're in this process because you deeply respect your partner and you're excited about creating something together. And with that also it's so important to have a commitment that if for any reason the merger were not to succeed, you would still go back to being the best of partners. So those are sort of the key fundamentals of assessing your readiness to merge. The other questions that we had in the pre-materials are, how do you approach another land trust to discuss merger? And is there a tipping point with land trust where merger becomes a real option? And for those of you who are on the call, and there were quite a few of you who aren't quite at the point of thinking about merger, but maybe are interested in learning more, I would really encourage you to reach out to your partners that you're interested in having these conversations about, and not be afraid, or speak to Amy and get some advice from her about partners in your region that you might be able to approach. But the conversation, I think, doesn't have to be overthought. You can talk through partnership, what you're looking for the future. And you can use the word merger and have that conversation, you know, I think with ease. The tipping point comes really when both the land trusts have reached an agreement to begin the due diligence phase. So you've gone through enough of a getting to know you phase to feel like you have some shared visioning for the future. You've done enough of your own internal assessment to think you have the capacity and the wherewithal to go forward on a 12 to 18 month long process. You've built trust. And then you just simply have that agreement on the first step. And again, it's not whether to merge, it's just whether to enter into a period of time where you're going to think about merger. So those are sort of getting you up to the point of merger. And now we're going to take a moment and just do a second poll. So Rebecca, do you want to explain this second poll to our group?
Sure. So I just went ahead and launched it. I hope that you're all seeing it. It says, if you are considering merger, what do you perceive as the primary obstacle to moving forward? Loss of local connection, loss of community support and donors, loss of control over the land trust, getting your board to buy in, expense of the merger process, or the capacity to support a larger organization. And if there's anything we didn't cover in that list, go ahead and add into the chat.
Oh, it's so interesting to watch how these numbers come out also. So it looks like, you know, there's a lot of equivalency on these answers, but getting board buy-in was, for just over a quarter of you, one of the primary obstacles. And I think what's great about the program that CLCC and the Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation are offering is the process of feasibility. And during that time where you have internal conversations to build the comfort of your organization in going forward, there are resources now available to you that simply weren't here even a year or two ago, and might really help those groups who are concerned about board buy-in get through that process. And then the other, it looks like the other top was loss of community support and donors. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies for retaining town-based community support as we go forward. Okay, Rebecca, is there anything else you want to say about the poll, or do you want to close it?
I think we're all set. It should be off of everyone else's screen, so
okay.
keep on going.
This is Amy. There was just one comment that was put in the chat for other, and it just said, Tim said, drift from our mission. That was one other reason, or one other potential obstacle. Thanks for sharing that, Tim, in the chat.
Yeah. It's so important in a merger process to be able to communicate to your membership base if your mission is changing or if it isn't. And that going through that conversation is something that typically would take place a little bit right up front in that feasibility. Do you have a sufficient shared vision for the future to go forward. Okay, so the next slide, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I also really want to demystify the process of merger and to show you that it can be easy and doable and straightforward. So the first one is love thy partner. I hope that if you're in the process of thinking about merger, you are feeling a lot of excitement with the other land trusts that you're working with. We're all in this great work of conservation together. And one of the exciting aspects about merger is envisioning an organization that can do more because you're partnering than you ever could have done alone. And then that's going to have to carry you through the whole process, because it's a long process, it's a lot of work. Whenever you start to struggle, I think you have to go back and think about all of those really wonderful reasons that you came together to work on this in the first place. There are two sort of precursor documents that most groups, I think, adopt as they start the due diligence phase. So I'm just going to explain those because they're pretty straightforward. And those are the confidentiality agreement and a good faith agreement. And those you're just really going to start at the very beginning of your due diligence phase. You also need to establish a committee and a staff structure if you have staff, but staff are certainly not necessary for the due diligence period in your work plan. And so we'll talk through a little bit about how you might do that to be successful. And then you're going to have a work plan. And I've told Amy that I'll share the work plan that we used, as well as some of our other due diligence guidance documentation, so that you don't have to recreate the wheel if you'd like to take a look at a model. So at the beginning of the merger process, typically land trusts will take a moment to pass two resolutions. One is a confidentiality agreement. And that can be very complex, but I tended to prefer simple agreements. So you're making some very simple promises to your partner. The materials and documents you share won't be retained if the merger doesn't go forward. You return them or destroy them. Information that's exchanged during the merger process won't be shared. It won't be used for the advantage of either party. And if for any reason the merger is not agreed to, you'd be willing to issue a joint statement if that was necessary to explain the decision and to present each other in the best light possible. And again, that really gets back to the heart of your agreement upfront, that you're never going to let anything happen that would be detrimental to the partnership you have with that group. The next agreement would be a good faith agreement. And this is a resolution that your board would pass that would commit your organization for a period of time to go through this due diligence process. And again, probably not less than 12 months. The board would most likely delegate authority to negotiate the merger to a committee or staff if you have them. In the mergers that I worked on, land trusts both had committees, and that was terrific because the committees can take on a lot of the due diligence work, and your land trust committee can meet on its own on a normal natural committee cycle, and then also you can have joint committee meetings where you can work with your partner to address any issues that really need some conversation. As part of the good faith agreement, you're agreeing not to you promise to disclose any significant changes. Sorry, I was kind of going back and forth over that sentence. And if you were doing something like engaging in another merger, you'd have to notify them and get their consent before you did that. If you were changing your board membership, you'd let your partner know before you made those changes, that kind of thing. And both parties reserve the ability to withdraw from negotiations at any time by a vote of either board of directors. So the due diligence process is really where you spend your most time as you're going through your due diligence. Going through the merger process. The first step is you're going to compile a list of documents that have to be exchanged. And I did that for our mergers, and I've told Amy I'll share it. But you're compiling everything from board minutes to IRS tax exemption letters to employee contracts if they have them, to information on their land, their property records. And those are documents that you're compiling to share with your partner and vice versa. Next, you establish your leadership team. So that's your committee and staff structure and your meeting schedule. So we tended to meet for my partnership committee about quarterly. And then during the most intense parts of due diligence, we had meetings with the other land trusts on sort of like alternating month cycles, something along those lines. And then you create a work plan, and you're dividing your due diligence by natural subject areas like finance, stewardship, governance. And you're simply working through your review of those documents to assess whether there are any problems that need to be addressed, anything that might be a deal breaker. And you're just working through that as a group. There were a number of questions, and in fact, the next two slides, I believe, dig into due diligence a bit more. And again, I wanted to address your specific questions. And there were a number of questions that get at the issues of control and identity. So I just thought we would go through the questions that we received. So the first question was, how do you navigate board or staff dynamics when merging? And I think that that gets into one, how you're governing yourself upfront as an organization and your own internal leadership and comfort level. Clear communication, being forthright, that is always essential. And just like any other aspect of governance, if you have maybe difficult personalities, you don't put them on your partnership committee, I suppose. But you're just navigating those processes in some ways as you normally would. And then also really listening to your partner and being very sensitive to any concerns or issues that they may raise in the process. How do you handle the control issues? And this ties also into some of the other questions that are here, like how do you avoid losing your identity? So part of the merger process is always going to be talking about what's that new organization going to look like. And in almost every merger, it's two or more organizations coming together, but in fact, you're not forming a new organization, and there's some very practical reasons why you don't do that. Rather, what you're doing is you're picking one entity that survives and one that doesn't. The reason why you choose that approach, and you don't have to stick with that approach, but the reason why most people stick with that is if you create a new organization, you have to go through the process of reincorporating it and getting a new 501c3 tax exemption. And it's not worth the time and the effort to go through that process. So then as you're talking about what this new organization is going to look like, there are going to be issues that come up. Well, what's the board representation going to be? And that's a very common issue. And there are also, I think, creative ways to think about how to continue representation outside of the board through advisory committees and town-based committees. So then one of the other questions here was, how do you keep town-based community involvement? And I was sort of touching on that. In the merger I completed, we created a town-based advisory council comprised of former board members and volunteers from that community. And that advisory council will be meeting regularly through the year and taking a very active role in activities like stewardship and acquisition, public events. They may even help with some of the fundraising work in that community. So there are creative ways to help keep involvement, but also share responsibility, because it's much more than just board representation. It's all the different ways that you can include diverse engagement and a big audience in the work that you're doing. You want to be growing the opportunities for people to participate in your organization, not limiting those. What is the difference between a merger and a takeover was another question that we had. And I think that if any group were to feel like they were in a takeover, you really would want to reconsider what you were working on. It really should feel like you're coming together to build something that's new and is advancing your mission. So I will now move on, I think, to the next slide. Nuts and bolts questions. What issues do you need to consider when taking title to another land trust land and easements? And are there special considerations for accredited land trust? So even though there were some of you who are really in the very early stages of thinking about merger, there were a few of you who were also just interested in some of the practical aspects of going through the merger process. What issues do you have to take into account when taking title to land and easements? You're going to start by thinking about it just like you would any other acquisition. You may want to inspect their properties. You may be thinking about doing title searches. In some cases, you may even think about getting title policies. That won't be necessary in every circumstance. It depends a bit on what you're finding in due diligence. Were they regularly getting title insurance or title policies? Are there any known encumbrances or violations that you have a particular concern about the risk? And those would be the types of issues that you would weigh. There's no requirement to get title or title policies as part of the merger process, but you should be evaluating the risk and be comfortable with the risk that you're taking on. For accredited land trusts, there are a few special considerations. So you would want to pay attention if you're merging with an accredited land trust to any expectations for improvement they had received during their accredited process and what their current practices are. As most of you who've worked with accreditation know, it's your most recent work that the accreditation process focuses on, and the work you've done since you became accredited. So you would want to be taking a look at that. You have an obligation, if you're an accredited land trust, to notify the Land Trust Accreditation Commission of your intent to merge. You don't have to do that until it's quite clear you will be merging. You can either do that shortly before or shortly after you've merged, but you do have an obligation to let them know. Talking to them early is incredibly helpful because their staff they just do a terrific job of answering questions that you might have about how do you stay compliant through a merger process. And lastly, there's a link here, and that takes you directly to a website that summarizes the considerations for land trusts that take title to another group's land or easements. And it talks through, for example, the issues related to title, but also if they don't have fee management plans, you know that you have to do those within a year, that kind of thing. Okay. Once you've gone through your due diligence phase, towards the end of that, if things are looking like you're going to proceed towards merger, there is a plan of merger that's created. And certainly when you get to this phase in the process, if not earlier, you'll be working with an attorney. The plan of merger itself is a bit like a contract. They can be longer or shorter, but they contain a few standard elements. It'll name which is the surviving entity. If the entity is changing its name, it'll say that in there as well. It'll list the effective date of the merger, and it will list what the approval process will be. So what board votes are required or other votes might be required. If your bylaws have a voting membership, that will be a requirement of merger. So it will list that process and probably state the dates for those votes, which is really just to help you stay on track as you plan. It'll talk about the effect of merger. There you'll find the language related to the board composition or staff representation or advisory committees. And you can really go either way on this. You can be explicit, or you can just have the trust and agreement between the two parties. But quite often it'll just say, this is what we've decided on terms of board, and how many from each group are going to be going forward. And then there's representations and disclosures. So you're letting your partner know if there were any outstanding encroachments or violations on your property, if there were any threats of legal action, you'd be disclosing that. And you're making some promises like, well, we have title to the best of our knowledge, good title to all of our properties. So you make some basic representations and you do some basic disclosures. There are 2 filings that are done. There's a certificate of merger that's filed with the Secretary of State's office, and the filing fee is something really quite affordable for land trusts, maybe $35 or $50. And then you file a name change certificate. So if one organization is merging into another, you file a name change certificate in the towns for which the organization that's disappearing holds property, and it's just a name change certificate. And then that land trust assets will automatically then be held by in the chain of title by the new organization. The tax clerk takes care of all of that for you as a result of filing the name change certificate. And then lastly, integration. And this was the slide, quite honestly, I was the least happy with as I was putting it together, because I put everything that you have to think about for integration. I tried to fit it on one slide. I think what's most important to think about for integration is to plan the time and to respect the time that's involved in bringing 2 groups together once you've merged. You will be transferring your financial assets, you'll be integrating a donor database, you'll be integrating property records, you might be expanding your inspection program now to cover multiple groups, multiple properties in multiple towns. You might be transferring a website or social media. And then most importantly, you're integrating your programs, your communications, your community outreach. And that's a long-term process. And even more importantly, you're investing in the culture of this new organization. And so while you may have felt like you crossed the finish line with the merger, really there's still a lot of important work to do going forward to then make sure that this new organization has the best chance of success, and that the people who are involved and invested in the organization adapt to their new roles and their new leadership responsibilities. We are now at the Q&A part. So I'm going to stop and ask Rebecca if there are some questions already in the chat that she'd like to share.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. We just got one here from Scott. He said, he brought up, doesn't a merger dilute interest by one's local community and support and participation? And for all our mostly volunteer boards where board members are highly invested in actual participatory work, doesn't that get diluted as well?
I think that that's one of the most important challenges that has to be addressed in a merger, because what makes Connecticut such a strong state to work in conservation is that we have a land trust in every town, and we have that close in community engagement. And in addition, as most of you know, land conservation is uniquely local. It's your personal relationships in a town that often are what lead to your best land acquisitions, that lead to your donor relationships. The strategy that I've used, and I think this will be a very interesting conversation maybe in a year or two when we circle back, is again to set up town-based councils that will be very important for leadership. People are everything. And I don't think you want to lose one person in a merger. especially not leaders of either of the land trusts that are merging together. And those councils, and the way that we're going to use them, will be really involved in continuing public events, picnics, hikes, stewardship, trail work days. And that's the approach we've chosen, and I'm sure there are many others, but that issue is universally a concern and one of the most important issues to address.
And I just want to weigh in. Thank you, Catherine. And Catherine did such an excellent job, particularly, addressing, I think, that in the context of her slide on due diligence, because that is where, in the feasibility study portion of this program, we can really start to dig down. And that's where you really can sit down with the other group and start to hash out some of these questions and concerns that you might have, and get a feel for your compatibility and long-term prospects for joining together as one organization. So that was a great question, and I'm really pleased that was there. Thanks.
So, Catherine, it seems in the chat that there's an interest to talk a little bit more about a case study because, due to the fact that there are 137 land trusts in Connecticut, talking about just some of the mergers that may have already happened since we are prolific with land trusts here.
Well, the one I'll talk about, the one we completed in 2019. And again, I think every merger is entirely unique. So I think it's helpful to have an example. But then every example has certain limitations. So the merger Weantioge completed in 2019 was with Brookfield Open Space Legacy, Inc., which was an all-volunteer board in the town of Brookfield. They owned fee properties. They had about 8 different preserves, but roughly 35 different deeds that had been transferred in to create those 8 different preserves. And just over 200 acres of land, again, that they held all in fee. And that was an organization that was concerned about perpetuity and would they be able to continue to have a strong board going forward and recruit new board members. We had partnered with them successfully over about a 2-year period. In that case, we had a nature preserve that abutted theirs. Both of our preserves were open to the public with hiking trails. We had trails that extended from their preserve onto ours. And they unfortunately lost the parking area for their preserve, and they needed a new one. So we had staff and they didn't. So we wrote a grant and secured the funding for their parking area. And then we jointly implemented that project. And through that process, really just found that we loved working together. And they were very interested to work with an organization like Weantioge that had staff that had greater financial reserves for the future to help them do properly care for their land going forward, and also take care of their land on an annual basis. So property inspections, continued trail maintenance and stewardship. And there's been significant work that was needed for those properties. About a year ago, 18 months ago, there was a macro burst in Brookfield, which is, as you might know, it's sort of like a very powerful small tornado. And it really decimated one of the Brookfield Land Trust preserves, and costing thousands of dollars worth of tree work and staff time and organizing trail work days that were really significant in terms of volunteer support. And because we were so closely partnering with them, we could help them get through that process successfully. And it was simply just one of the benefits of close partnership and our 2 groups coming together. And they've continued. They have an advisory council that's comprised of most of their board members that meets on a quarterly basis with our staff. And they are continuing by and large to do the work they were doing as a land trust previously, but they no longer have to do the work they may not have in fact wanted to do, like annual property inspections or all of fundraising and those of activities that I'm not sure any of us who really love conservation got into this work to do in the first place. So that was that case study, and there have been some great other ones. You know, the New Haven Land Trust, their recent merger is a terrific example, and I encourage you all to go look. I think they've called themselves Gather New Haven, and I might not be getting that quite right, but it's a really wonderful recent merger.
The other ones that I will let you know about, one occurred in the early 90s, and actually I helped at the legal work with that when I was practicing law, and that was when the 3-town land trust became the 4-town land trust, which then became the 5-town land trust, and so on and so forth, and finally became the Northern Connecticut Land Trust. And that involved towns up in Tolland County. And I believe we might have a representative of the Northern Connecticut Land Trust, or maybe more, on the phone today, and they're welcome to weigh in. But that was a merger that really, way back when though, in different times when we weren't talking about standards and practices, we weren't talking about accreditation. There was a Land Trust Service Bureau handbook, and that was about it. And so it was simpler in that regard, but these were smaller organizations that were financially just not going to make it on their own. And they felt that the only way to survive as a land trust would be to merge with another. And it was truly, as it was really truly for the matter of survival, that these little organizations combined. And again, they kept adding on town by town until they became, with 6 towns, the Northern Connecticut Land Trust. And that's a very successful land trust. We actually have a PowerPoint on that merger available as well, which we'll post in our resource section. The other one, there was 2 others. One was more recently, where the Land Conservancy, or the Land Trust of Danbury, and did you mention that one, Catherine? The Land Trust of Danbury merged with New Fairfield, and so that is now the Candlewood Regional Valley Land Trust, and they have a lovely website. You can go and look and visit with them and hear more about their story. But that was really another one where more, because it is a modern case of merger, that they got into more of the details and the reasons that Catherine had articulated in her presentation. And we're really looking at some of the impacts that they might have with respect to conservation, both in acquisition and stewardship, if they had combined forces in that region. And then the last one that I jotted down, and I was thinking as you asked that question, was actually the New Canaan Land Trust merged with the New Canaan Audubon Society, and that was a few years ago. And that was also a very nice merger, which was very complementary in nature, where they had some shared ownership interests in property and saw the value in their programmatic work together. And so the Audubon Society, the New Canaan Audubon Society, merged with the New Canaan Land Trust, and it's a part of that organization now. So there are a number of examples, successful examples in land conservation around the state. And of course, there are many examples of mergers outside of land conservation that you can also look to for some guidance.
So if we're ready for another question, we actually got 2 questions that are kind of related. One through my email asking, is there a less involved process to work through, like affiliation? Could a smaller land trust become an affiliate of a larger land trust? And then similarly, Scott brought up in the chat that he was a trustee of a very well-respected but relatively small liberal arts college. While they didn't merge with other colleges, they consolidated their back office functions. So are there examples of land trusts who have done that as well?
Yeah, so I've given a version of this talk before where I actually had a slide that goes through the sort of like the spectrum of partnership, because it's sometimes helpful to think through the different options for partnership before, and that this could be part of the feasibility work that you do with Amy before you make the decision that merger is the right path for you. So partnership can be, it can be contractual, right? It doesn't have to be a merger. You could have an agreement to share certain services like shared staff. And then when you're getting into relationships that are like affiliations, what you're typically really looking at are supported and supporting organizational relationships, where to put it in sort of like a common language, you really have sort of like a parent and a subsidiary. They're still two separate organizations, but they are tied together by, like, for example, their bylaws that really say how they're going to be interacting. And then you have those versions, and then you have all the way up through merger. And when we started this process at my organization, now first looking at partnerships and mergers, about 3 years ago, that's where we started. We looked at that spectrum and really thought through, did we have to merge? Were there other options that would be more suitable? And the short answer is, every group can go through and look at that same process and decide what would work best for their particular context. In our case, obviously we came out thinking merger was, for us, the right choice. In some ways, it simplifies your long-term work, and it may even reduce problems or issues that might come up long-term, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And there are other options that you could address with Amy and through this Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation opportunity as part of your feasibility.
Thanks, Catherine. That's exactly right. So I would encourage you, of course, to contact me about that. But I also wanted to remind you of some of the projects that we have undertaken around the state through our Land Trust Regional Advancement Initiative program, which is exactly for that purpose of bringing groups together to kind of explore different opportunities for collaboration. And in the very first one that we did, and I believe Margot Burns is on the call. Yep, I see her down there. We actually, the very first advancement initiative program that we ran was down in the lower Connecticut River Valley. And there were 15 land trusts that participate in the Regional Conservation Partnership down there under Margot's leadership. And we actually ran through 3 different types of projects around collaboration. And one of them was a feasibility study for shared services. And that is also posted on our website, and we'll make sure that we include the links to those project deliverables on the resource page that we'll set up for this. But to Catherine's point, I mean, there's just a whole spectrum of collaborative opportunities that may lead up to a merger. And sometimes it's going through a intermediate type of collaboration, whether it be a project partnership or some sort of shared services, that will ultimately lead Land Trust to decide that, yeah, this relationship is one that we want to solidify in the form of a merger. So I do encourage you to contact me if you have interest in exploring the feasibility study aspect of this program and or an advancement initiative that might be appropriate for your region.
I'm scrolling through here, and I don't know if I see any other questions that have been unanswered. But again, feel free to keep adding them to the chat, everyone. I've also put in, just so you know, a few different links for our resource page, as well as for our page on this grant opportunity for merger assistant with the PCLB Foundation. So, and we'll go ahead and launch a closing survey then. So if you do see this, oh, I see a few coming in here, just letting us know if you think a merger would be beneficial for your organization, and if you think it would be beneficial for land conservation as a whole in your region.
Going through that and answering your questions, I'll also just invite you, if you have any questions after the presentation, not to hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to talk through confidentially any of the issues that or questions that you have about merger, and also about our work more broadly, or working regionally as opposed to on a town-based level.
Thank you. Catherine, and I will tell you that Catherine's slides will be available, as well as, of course, her contact information there on our resource page as well. And I do encourage you to contact her about if you have questions that you feel more comfortable speaking with on a one-to-one basis about the merger process that Weantioge has undertaken. Great. Well, it looks like I think, Rebecca, did we stop it? Yeah. So this is very interesting. Terrific. Well, I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see there's interest in the merger, particularly when we have this amazing opportunity in Connecticut now that has been provided to us so generously by the Peter and Carmelucia Buck Foundation. And really, there are other opportunities to explore with us as well. So I really encourage you to watch for more opportunities just through our general programming, but also to contact us personally to talk more about some of the programs that might be of interest to your land trust and some potential partners. And we are, let's see, how are we with time? Yeah, so we're at 1:30 now, but we have decided that we give you an extra 15 minutes if needed. Happy to stay on here, but for those of you that had planned for the hour, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And for all you do. Honestly, the response to this online programming has just been remarkable, and it really does reflect the tremendous dedication that all of you have here in Connecticut to land conservation and carrying out your mission. It is a source of inspiration for us every single day, and it really is an honor to work with all of you. So thank you so much for coming today. And again, I think Catherine and Rebecca and I will hang around for a little longer to see if there's any other questions, but otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. It's a beauty out there. I won't share with you how many more Zoom calls I have. So I'm jealous of all of you who can get out there. So go ahead and enjoy it and stay safe, and thank you for coming.
And it was great to see so many of your faces, and good luck. I hope you all enjoy the process going forward.
And thank you again, Catherine, for the terrific presentation.
Yeah, so for Kimberly, she just asked, would there be example work plan posted? I'll share what we have.
You know, one thing, and I regret forgetting this, Joe, I apologize, but Joe Bresco had just reminded me that, you know, as part of our advancement initiative work in the Southwest region, there has been very strong discussions around merger, and we do expect a letter of interest hopefully coming from that region. But the other groups that are interested but not yet ready to merge include some towns, include some municipalities. And so certainly when you're thinking about potential partners, your municipal partners are available to you as well if they don't have a land trust and would be interested in having one. So thanks, Joe. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that when the bigger group was here, but we'll make sure we put something up there about that as well.
Those are some great questions in there. I was just going through the chat.
Well, I think, unless there are any other questions, I think we could probably wrap this up. Oh, there's a new message.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for coming. All right, well, I think we can wrap it up and get on with the day. Catherine, thank you so much again, and thank you all for coming today. Who's left here? Looks like just we have our little small party. And Stay safe, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next Zoom call.
It was
Looks
great
like
to
we've got
see
the
you.
last three from Avalonia. The last three standing.
Rebecca, thank you so much for your help.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Catherine. Really appreciate it.
All righty.
Absolutely. Have a great day, guys.
Catherine, I'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.